Well, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you will find this webinar extremely useful. We would like to give you tools that you can take away post this webinar that you can start implementing at your organizations, at your companies, to make sure that your Salesforce practice is bigger, stronger, better in your career. Along with that, it also becomes bigger, stronger, better. So today the topic in discussion is keeping everything in focus, maintaining end-to-end quality through automation. And with me, I'm joined by some incredible presenters. But before I hand the mic to them, let me talk a little bit about myself because I have to. My name is Prashant. I head the solution engineering here at AutoRABIT. I've been in and around Salesforce for almost 2 decades. I've been in the Salesforce DevOps phase for more than a decade now. I've seen the space grow. I've seen how traditional practices are being applied to Salesforce DevOps and how Salesforce DevOps is at an incredible space. So let me hand it over to Scott. Scott, would you probably give a brief introduction?
Oh, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Erlanger, and I lead the product marketing for our development team focused solutions here at Tricentis. And that includes testing of various types of applications from Salesforce to web to mobile type of applications. At Tricentis, we provide solutions to provide quality for all your various types of applications. I'm looking forward to a great discussion today. And I'd like to introduce Ian Flanagan, who also leads our solution architecture team for our development tools focus as well. Hi, Ian.
Hey, how you doing, Scott? Looking forward to talking to everybody and giving some folks some insight into the tool and how it can help you in your Salesforce testing journey.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so just to paint a broad stroke in terms of what we'd be seeing today, first and foremost, we'd be understanding the Salesforce DevOps or landscape as we see it, and we want to give you, like I said, we want to give you some tools that you can take away today. We want to talk about what value that we bring to our products and what good looks like in DevOps and testing. We want to show you a live demo of how these products come together and what problem are we here to solve. And lastly, we will top it off with any question and answers that you have. Scott, Ian are incredible minds that you can tap into for test automation. I'd be happy to answer any questions with respect to DevOps in general, code quality, code security, CI/CD, sandbox management, you name it. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, let's see what we're talking about. Salesforce, again, is a low-code application. When Salesforce first started, it was the most easiest thing to adopt. Salesforce basically what was a plug and play. It was easy to get on. It is easy to start. But what happened was, as Salesforce scaled and as Salesforce was being used outside of the traditional sales sphere, we started seeing problems, and those problems can be broken down into two broad segments: productivity and security. Under productivity, there are a couple of challenges. Like, for example, the platform piece here. While Salesforce low-code tools like Flow and Lightning App Builder promise efficiency, they often require unexpected investments, and those investments could be maintenance. Those investments could be debugging. Uh, Enterprises need to budget for Salesforce specific training and specifications for admins and developers. So it's just not the cost of the app itself, but there are also these additional costs that come in. The, Sometimes there are also limited automation in terms of what you can do around Salesforce. Salesforce does not come out with out-of-the-box tools, and that's where ISVs like ourselves, try to fit in that gap in order to give you the tools that you need to make sure Salesforce works at scale. In terms of security challenges, now this is getting more and more voice, so we want to make sure that we are also hearing this. There was a recent Krebs article that got published where it was found that Salesforce Experience Cloud or guest portals are leaking data that are running on guest users. So we want to make sure that we talk about it and apply the right security practices. Um, Again, Salesforce comes with a lot of Apex code in it, so sometimes there is a risk of sensitive data that can get exposed because of improperly configured Lightning components. So at a high level, this is sort of the big picture that we see, and we'll talk about how you can actually solve this. And again, like I said, you can take back these tools and apply it in your company or in your enterprise. So first and foremost, we truly believe that what you cannot see is what you cannot fix. And if you do not care, you can never fix that. So in order to care, you actually need to see, right? So for this process, we created something called as a release flow map. Now we applied this at hundreds of customers, and we found incredible value in terms of how they run their shop. So if you look at this is basically broken down by SDLC. You have plan, development, integration, QA, and production. Those are basically the stages of your SDLC. And what you see as those blue, green, and red swim lanes, those are where you actually capture how do you what are your environments, how do your people work, how do what is the process that connects your people, and what are the problems that you're having at each stage of your development, right? Under the flow of code, we capture the environments, like for example your Salesforce, your version control, your ALM systems like Jira. Under the SDLC associated with the flow, we capture how are people interacting with each other, with the system, with the tools, and so on and so forth. And under bottlenecks, we capture what are the challenges that you're having at that particular stage or that particular um, you know uh, meeting of minds, if you will. So let me show you how this actually looks like. Now, this is going to be a big picture, but this is actually a flow that we mapped at one of our current customers. And we were able to map out the bottlenecks in detail for them, which allowed us to make a plan for us to sort of fix them. So now let me just break it down. On the top, the flow of code, you can see the sandboxes are connected to the feature branches. The feature branches go and deploy to an integration org. From integration, it goes to QA, and from QA, you can see that it is going to production. You can see the merge lines, how the merge lines are converting. Uh, Below that, you see a detailed process map on, a user story is getting created, changes are getting developed, who creates the feature branch, and from there, how do who pulls to integration, what happens if you have conflicts, what happens when it passes, how does it go into QA? So this meeting of minds, if you will, where the process is accurately capturing what is happening on your environment. This is of incredible value. So this is applying the concept of lean and lean principles or lean engineering to sort of paint a picture of what do you look like, right? And what that allows you to do is capture the bottlenecks. For example, in for this particular customer, we found out that when they were doing development, there was no security testing that they were doing. They did not have a static code analysis tool. They did not have the right, when they were doing development, there was nothing looking at security. We also found that for every user story, if they're creating a branch, there would be a feature branch explosion. Like, for example, your team is doing 10,000 user stories a year. So after 1 year, you'll have 10,000 feature branches that adds into the muck of Git, right? So these are the ways you can sort of boil down what are the challenges that you're having. And traditionally, what we've also seen is most of the challenges come during the QA phase. Right now, there are many types of testing. One of the key areas of Salesforce is because Salesforce at the end of the day is a web application. Testing a web application of what your end user would be seeing is I cannot stress the importance of it. So let me hand it off to Scott to sort of start breaking down what does uh, testing look like in a QA phase, Scott.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Prasanth. I mean, I think the thing to really focus on, and what I kind of see here in this chart here, is just the different amounts of steps and processes that all have to come together as part of a software release process, and in particular as part of that QA phase here. All these steps have to work correctly in order for your quality software to make it out the door. And in order for these steps to reliably happen every single time, you nearly need the right type of solutions and tooling to make sure that this actually happens correctly. And when we're talk a little bit more about that right now. And one of the things that we, when you think about with Salesforce testing, I might call misconceptions, because generally people have an idea as to what testing means for Salesforce, but a lot of these ideas may not be completely correct. And this may sound familiar to you as well. One thing that we sometimes tend to hear is that, well, Salesforce already tests everything, so why do I need to do additional testing? They have these different releases, multiple times a year. That's what's covering the testing of Salesforce. Well, all right. Another thing that we tend to hear a lot as well is that, well, Salesforce is really just an internal tool. Bugs aren't really such a big deal because they're just going to impact internal teams and processes, and it's not going to have as much of a public-facing impact. Another thing that we tend to hear a lot as well is that Salesforce really doesn't need the same type of testing rigor that you might for a web app or for another type of mobile application or something with a database or a more complicated type of process. Well, again, since these are misconceptions, I want to point out some of the fallacies involved with these as well. If you look at, Salesforce already testing everything. Well, they test Salesforce, but they're not going to necessarily test all the screens, any kind of things that aren't connected correctly as part of your use case or your application. So the base functionality of Salesforce might be tested, but not necessarily how you're using it and how your users are using Salesforce as well. One thing about internal use only is it's not really true. Salesforce actually integrates with all kinds of different flows from, again, from business critical, things such as like e-commerce types of flows. They all feed through Salesforce. When Salesforce breaks down, it impacts your customers directly. It's not really just an internally facing tool. And when we get to the rigor of testing Salesforce, what we hear a lot is that people are tend to just try it out. They make sure the forms work correctly using sort of ad hoc manual testing processes. And I think the thing that you have to consider is when you go back to that, the form that we just looked like the diagram on the last page there, are you really covering all those boxes and arrows and then the complete flow as part of your software, lifecycle process there, if you're really just using these ad hoc manual testing and aren't actually specifically targeting each of those different points there? And I think the answer often ends up being no, and it leaves gaps as part of your coverage and part of the quality of your software. But there's several reasons why Salesforce testing in particular is difficult. And I think that leads to these sorts of challenges and these sorts of assumptions as well. The one is that, Salesforce does these regular recurring updates, but they don't necessarily account for what you're doing at the time and what kind of updates you have in your code base. So it's possible that your customizations and what you're working on at the time could conflict with these types of regular updates. And it's hard to coordinate these and ensure that you schedule them properly. Another one is the scope, of course, is broad and big. Salesforce covers all sorts of different flows across different types of groups, from finance to marketing or to whoever else is using it within your organization, sales, of course, as well. Salesforce is used, again, with diverse stakeholders, I was just mentioned, so different types of users who use it differently. They all have to be coordinated as part of testing. You have to cover all those different use cases as well. And it requires many different people to be involved to really gain that expertise across all those different flows. One thing about test automation is that a lot of it's really general purpose. There's lots of web testing solutions out there, and we provide several of them as well. And many of them aren't necessarily specifically built for Salesforce. And using a sort of a general purpose solution for testing out Salesforce, it can be done, but it causes all kinds of challenges, and you have to recreate sort of, again, specific functionality as part of your testing solution. And finally, it's highly technical. You have to know Salesforce. You have to know how all the bits and pieces work. If you have code behind the scenes, you have to understand how that works as well. You need the right set of Salesforce experts involved here in order to be able to cover Salesforce testing. So for all these reasons, sometimes it doesn't get the level of coverage and the level of rigor behind the testing that it absolutely requires. But when you look at it, sort of what actually is needed for Salesforce releases, you really need something that's more like a CI/CD, including testing as part of your release processes. Salesforce releases follow the same exact type of stages that you would for any software, from planning all the way through release to production. And essentially, your solution that covers these spaces here has to be able to cover certain types of characteristics for it to become, effective within these schemes here. First of all, efficiency. You need a solution that's going to really help your teams work faster. You need to be able to reduce effort automatically. Every single software released has to be able to have testing and has to be able to be done automatically as part of this process here. It has to be able to keep up with the speed that people are trying to release their code. You need something that's reliable, that's going to actually make it easy for the stakeholders to be able to actually get in in there and use it as well. It shouldn't be a burden to actually have your release process, your CI/CD with your testing together. And you need a process that's not going to allow for quality escapes in production. And finally, you want something that's, again, automatic and repeatable. Every single test check-in, every single development check-in needs to have tests, that's being run, and needs to ensure the coverage, ensure that there's no bugs that slip into production there. And it works to build these best practices across your organization for everybody who's using Salesforce. Now I'd like to hand this back over to Prasanth, who's going to talk a bit more about AutoRABIT's automated solutions.
Thank you very much, Scott. So just to reset on where we are. So we're talking about how to see your entire organization. We're talking about what actually happens in QA. We're giving you tools that you can take back and start applying now. We're talking about the complexities that come when you start applying the right QA processes and save your organization hundreds and thousands of dollars in bugs. So coming to AutoRABIT solution and why we're unique. So we have a suite of products, and our suite of products sort of wrap around the Salesforce SDLC and also production. Considering production holds most of your most sensitive data, your critical data. So let me start with our CodeScan solution. CodeScan is a solution that was explicitly designed for Salesforce code quality and Salesforce code security. It was designed to catch the vulnerabilities that can come across Salesforce code, like Apex flows, LWC, and also your posture of your Salesforce org when it comes to profiles, permission set. How many users have admin permission? Like, this is one of the major questions that we get asked when we run CodeScan on our at our enterprise customers. They are usually pretty shocked to see that they are having more admins than they're intended to, and that's because how Salesforce permission scope is designed to be around users rather than data. The second product that we have is our ARM, which is Automated Release Management, which is our core CI/CD product. It comes out of the box with a super scalable CI agent. It does sandbox management. It does profile management. It provides you an advanced data loader pro solution. And we also offer some solutions that are designed for industry-specific verticals, like, for example, banks and other industry verticals that Velocity supports or Salesforce Industry supports. So it is a supercharged product that comes with a lot of Salesforce specificity. And finally, Vault, which is our backup and recovery solution. This is our take on Salesforce backup. Now, Salesforce backup and restore is incredibly hard just because of the way Salesforce data schema operates. Finding the highest parent and the lowest child is always a challenge in Salesforce. So we figured out how to sort of break it down using the right algorithms. We've developed our own algorithm in order to sort of parse through the Salesforce schema. We optimized it for Salesforce APIs, meaning that we do not hit your governance limits. And to top it off, we come with an archive functionality where you can move your storage out. You can move your data outside of Salesforce and expose that back into Salesforce from an external storage. I know that's cool, and we do that so that for multiple reasons. One, you can take your sensitive data off Salesforce. Where if you do not know how many admins are there in your system, and then you have sensitive data in there, that just does not fit together. So we solve that problem, right? We solve the problem of not only backup and recovery, but also data management using Vault. So that's a little bit about what we do. Coming to let me also hand it back to Scott to talk about the great part that Tricentis is.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much, Prasanth. Just to sort of let you know who Tricentis is as a company, I'm not going to go into this slide into great depth, but this really highlights several of the different areas where we provide quality and testing solutions. The ones I think that are really worth focusing on here is test automation, the ability to move past manual testing and to create automated test cases faster and really accelerate your testing. We also have performance load testing, data, SAP, change impact analysis, test management, where you're able to actually manage all of your Salesforce test cases as well. And really at Tricentis, our solutions come together to bring these AI-powered, DevOps-ready, cloud-enabled ecosystems like Salesforce together as part of our testing solutions. But I also want to zoom into a little bit into that picture here and talk a little bit about our solutions for development teams. Testim is sort of essentially what we use for our AI-powered test automation. It covers web applications. It covers mobile. And we actually have Tricentis test automation, which you're going to see it for Salesforce, which you're going to see in a little bit, that provides this fast no-code test automation specifically built for Salesforce practitioners. So it covers a lot of those challenges that I talked about earlier with Salesforce testing through a solution that's specifically built for Salesforce testing. And we have, again, solutions about managing your test cases in Jira, as well as our most recent one, which is Tricentis Testim Copilot, which is generative AI to be able to speed up your test case authoring. And these really come together to be able to provide these, comprehensive solutions for custom application testing. And zooming in once more a bit on the actual Salesforce side of things, we have a solution that's called Tricentis Test Automation for Salesforce. Soon going to be called Tricentis Testim Salesforce, so keep your eyes open for that. And what it really is a solution built specifically for Salesforce testing. It uses metadata to be able to across the Salesforce steps and AI to be able to locate the elements within your pages and be able to create your tests more easily for dynamic pages. It's codeless. It's a no-code solution, so it doesn't involve writing code for your testing. It's essentially using a recorder to be able to click through your application. It's built for Salesforce, has all the test flows that you'd expect and you use regularly as part of Salesforce. You're able to reuse these tests. You write it once, but you find that these other pages are able to take advantage of these same tests. So you don't have to create it every single time for every single flow. You're able to build this library of testing that exists to be able to accelerate your Salesforce testing and assure your quality. And finally, too, again, we talked a bit about these Salesforce releases that I think occur 3 times a year. And we do our pre-release testing on our side to help ensure that your customizations, all the changes that you made as part of your Salesforce environment will keep running even after these updates happen, and it ensures that, your users have a positive experience that keeps running in those situations there. And now I'd like to hand this back over to Prasanth, who's going to, I think that what we really need to see is some hands-on usage of both of our solutions together. And I'm going to hand this back to Prasanth, who's going to kick this off.
Thank you. I cannot agree more. So just to reset for everybody on the call here. So we spoke about how you need to see your entire shop to understand where the problems are in your shop. You have to focus on code security and code quality. And how do you do that in Salesforce is what we're exactly about to see. So let me start sharing my screen here, and let's get this show on the road. All right, let me hope I'm sharing the right screen. All right, I hope you guys are able to see my screen. All right. All right, so first,
looks
all
good.
right. Thank you. All right, so let's first start with where it all begins, right? If I play out the life of a developer, I'd be usually coding on my VS Code. I'd be off Salesforce, and Salesforce provides these beautiful tools like DX and other VS Code extensions so that the developer can be spending more time writing quality code rather than trying to figure out Salesforce schema. So starting where the developer starts. So here I have an Apex class. Now I have my VS Code here pre-configured with CodeScan, one of our products that looks at code security and code quality. Now code quality, like the two ends of code quality, right? You can catch issues as they occur. You can catch issues when you try to test them at a QA and integration, and that's where Tricentis comes in. CodeScan is more like a static code analysis tool. So in this class, now I have a bunch of issues in this class, and mind you guys, this is directly from a Salesforce repository. It's called eBikes. You can all go in and download it. It's a Trailhead app, and I have a communities landing site page. I've added this little piece of code block to actually show you some more issues here. But I can see that as I'm writing this code, I am getting my issues right in front of me. So I can see one more comment line needs to be added to reach a minimum threshold of 25% comment density. Avoid unnecessary constructors, document empty constructors. So you can see quality feedback that is coming to you as you're writing code. Think of this as Grammarly, but for code. So once a Salesforce developer admin, whomever is finished writing the code, the next step is to move this code into a reliable version control system so that they can start collaborating with other developers where they're not stepping on each other's shoes, where they are independently working on their branches. So for that, let me switch screens here and go into our release management product. So our release management product comes out of the box with something called as EZ commit, or pronounced as easy commit. So where we remove the complexity of Salesforce, the complexity of Git, and make it a really simple experience for Salesforce developers to move their metadata into a version control system. Let's see how that works. So I have a Salesforce org here. I can choose who's the author who's making the code change. I can choose what I can point it to the repository I am working with. So here I have a DX repository. My branch is 15 clone 2, odd name, I know. And then I have a package directory. Now, what directory I am working with. Now, in terms of getting changes in Salesforce, now Scott was mentioning that it is important to be metadata aware. What does it mean? Right? Metadata aware is Salesforce has 650 metadata types and counting, changes every 3 months. So it is important for companies like us to have a big block of our engineering logic around this metadata, because this is where the magic happens around Salesforce. It is to be, in Benioff's words, to have the metadata context is the best thing that can happen next to AI, right? So what we do is we auto draft what are the changes that are happening in your Salesforce org. Now, the way we do this is we compare the last modified date in your Salesforce org and we compare it to the last commit date in your version control. So thereby we're able to identify the footprint of the change. Instead of you figuring out across that 650 metadata types what has changed, I can simply say that, hey, give me everything that has changed from the 1st of April. Now here I'm just putting a random date, but this could be the date of your start of your sprint. This could be yesterday, based on the changes that you're making. And the big part of it here, the Scott and I have been speaking about for the last few minutes, is you gotta test always, right? You have to test continuously. So for that, before we commit those changes into version control, we will invoke code scan once again to see what is the new code, what kind of issues that's a new code carry. And I can tie this into my ALM system. I can connect this to my Jira. I can connect this to my story, and I can say that, okay, this here's how here's how the progression of the story is. But anyway, for now, I'm going to just skip this. So let me hit next. So when I hit next, like I was saying, this is where we talk to the metadata. We go and figure out what is the last modified date of each Salesforce component, and we find out what is the last commit date of each Salesforce component in that version control system, in that branch. And this usually takes about 30 seconds. I should have probably prepared this, but never mind. This is a live demo. So as you can see, it is going through each one of those metadata, and you'd be surprised by the incredible speed at which we are able to sort of scan through the entire Salesforce org and get that information out, right? So Lightning Bolt, I think this is a new one that we've seen. Digital Experience Bundle, again, for people who are running portals on Salesforce Experience Clouds, we are also able to track that particular metadata. Now, is it important? Is it necessary that you have to go through all of this every time? Not necessarily. Like if you know what you have changed, you can simply go and click those buttons, select those metadata and move forward. Now here I can see that I have a bunch of components that change, and you can see this spreads across the entire Salesforce metadata. Like I said, you'd be surprised by the incredible speed at which we're able to parse through the entire Salesforce org and get this information out. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to choose a single Apex class to keep it simple, and I'm going to submit it for validation. Now, validation occurs in 3 different places, right? So it happens in a static code analysis tool. I can choose the right tool, and I can say that I can also configure if I want to run it on all metadata or only newly added metadata. I can do a mock deployment to see if this thing sticks, right? And I also can configure a peer-to-peer code review where I'm making sure that unauthorized changes are not going into my Salesforce org. So once this is done, I'll set up a reviewer's email. I will say that here's my team lead, and I can put a commit label, commit for new Apex class, right? Um, this is the comment, right? Once this is done, I'm going to, when I hit finish, this is going to go and push, validate my, uh, sorry. So validate my change across these different systems. So while that runs, let me take you into CodeScan and let me show you what that looks like. So CodeScan, like I said, focuses on code quality and code security. So the job that I kicked off here is going to kick off another job at CodeScan, where we will run so on top of your overall code, we will run new code, and we will give you the rating of your code, just like like in school you get grades A, B, C, D, E. So we also rate the quality of your code, and all of this is behind a quality gate. So you can set up a gate saying that do not let this developer push his stuff into the version control if he is not meeting these minimum standards. And the standards can be in terms of security hotspots, vulnerabilities, bugs, technical debt, whatnot. This could be, and the biggest problem that I've seen at my life as a Salesforce developer is duplication of code. Duplication of code, and even with generative AI, it has become even a worse phenomena for software developers, where people are just taking code and dumping it into systems. So it is important that you have the right guardrails, tools like CodeScan, tools like AutoRABIT, tools like Tricentis, to make sure that you're catching them ahead of time. So just to give you a little insight into what that looks like, right? So here I have, if I go into security hotspots, I have few hotspots here, some on authentication and some on permissions. So on authentication, I can see that this particular profile, the SA clone profile, has violated the platform admin policy. The policy that you can configure, and we'll teach you all about this. That these are the permissions that should not be available for a profile. You can set that standard as an organization. For permission, again, you can see how for a different profile which is supposed to be only API only, if somebody changes it to have more scope, then you can also capture these issues. So once these are done, once you are setting the right guardrail, and once you have whatnot, you make sure that your developers are writing the right quality code. Then comes moving the code, right? You test it for code quality, you test it for code security. Now you'd be testing for, sorry, not testing, but you'd be moving the code. And this is where the magic of Tricentis and AutoRABIT sort of come together. Like I was talking about how we have like an incredible system in terms of very scalable CI system. So if you look at how we configure our CI, traditionally, all CI servers like GitHub, Bamboo require you to write YAML lines, right? Like YAML files, and keep those YAML files. Somebody has to maintain that. We have taken away all of that complexity, right? And we've introduced a CI that can be configured using GUI. Now, I know that there are a lot of checkboxes here, but every checkbox simplifies a bunch of logic behind the screen. To start with, under the build section, you can choose what branch you want to build from, and you can also choose a baseline division. The best part about baseline division is you don't have to scroll through your entire branch. Like, you don't have to go through the tail of your branch and to start building out your package. You can basically tell our system where exactly do you want to start building from. Like, it could be the previous commit, it could be a commit that you have done 5 days ago. Like, I can choose what my baseline here is. You can see that my baseline, I've selected something that I've done on the 11th of July. And this allows me to keep my system light, right? Because Salesforce is a huge dump of XML files, it is important to keep it light. And you can also choose where you want to deploy with. You can have a backup functionality where you can roll back your deployment. You can apply search and substitute rules for those emails that become tricky. You can run a dependency analyzer on your org. And you can also connect Tricentis. So here I am having a post call out that I'm making to a Tricentis org, where I'm basically passing a bunch of, don't worry about the token, this is a test org, so you won't probably see anything. Um, so here what I'm doing is I am, after my deployment is done, I'm just saying that, hey, Tricentis, here is my branch master, and here's my grid, and here are my configuration values, and boom, once I run this job, Tricentis gets invoked once my job is done. So I will show you a previous job that I ran, just to give you a good idea. So here you can see detailed information about what is the from revision, what is the true revision. And mind you, you can also configure CodeScan, like a static code analysis tool, as part of the CI, so that you constantly and consistently are testing for the code quality and code security issues. So once the deployment is done, I'm just going to show you, like, you can see a detailed deployment report here to see what are the components that are successful, what failed, what was your Apex test class run, and so on and so forth. You can also see an audit log. Like, so the best thing that we do is after every deployment, we tie it back to your Salesforce audit log. So you can see right in the audit log what has changed. So your deployable components have to match your audit log. So this is what we do, right? And like I was saying, once the deployment is done, we trigger off a deployment to Tricentis, and this is where we hand off as a good CI partner, we hand off to Tricentis to go and test those web components that we are not seeing. So we are seeing the back end of it, like the code and the flows and stuff like that, right? We're testing in the lines, but we're not testing in the page. And I truly believe that a visual approach of Salesforce, which creates a visual approach of programming, requires a visual approach to testing, and that's what I think Tricentis solves. So let me hand it over to Yan here to give us a brief demonstration of how Tricentis picks this up.
Well, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to show you the Testum for Salesforce. It was previously called Tricentis Test Automation for Salesforce, in the process of sort of rebranding and changing the name, but it is a SaaS-based solution. It's built on top of Testum. And as you can see here, we're logged in. It's a SaaS-based product. The only requirement to use the product is to install our extension and have access to the Chrome browser. So the first thing that you would do is you're going to come in and you're going to connect your Salesforce environment. So we have a number of different environments in here. We can have different personas. You can have different users, and you can log in with different users and test different permissions and things like that. So once you've done that, we're going to come over here, and the first thing really that you probably want to do is you want to click on this AI test creator. So what this is going to do, this is going to analyze your Salesforce environment. Whether you have custom fields, it really doesn't matter. It's going to analyze your Salesforce environment. And using our AI, it's actually going to generate a couple of test cases for you by default. And so this is a great way to use the tool and start getting value out of the tool really quickly. And as we can see here, it created about 6 different tests for us. Create account, create contact. So if we go ahead and click on this, we actually can run this particular test. And you saw how quickly it created those tests. So it's a great way to sort of get started. You can see some best practices. We'll show you some of the built-in steps here in a second, but this test will run very quickly. And we can see we're logged in, and this test is going to create an account, and then it's going to validate that account, and it's going to delete the account, and it's going to log out. So it's doing all the cleanup for you. If anyone's done any Salesforce testing, you know some of the challenges if you're working in a sandbox to quickly clean up something you've done can be kind of challenging. So we can see here now it's doing the validation. It's validating all these different fields here. It's going to go ahead and delete that account, and it's going to log out. So real simple, great example of how easy it is to use the tool. But I wanted to show you the new test. We got a bunch of built-in steps here. So, you know, we can basically log in. We can decide the user we want to log in with. If we want to hear record operations, we can do create. We can decide what we want to create. Maybe we want to create an account or a lead. So if we want to just type that in, we want to create a lead. We can validate the name if we wanted to do that. I'm going to do an account because it's just something that I've done a little bit more of with creating accounts. So let's do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do create. We're going to pick an account. And then these are all the different things that we can put in. So we can do account owner name. I'm just going to put test for the name. We can pass in variables in JavaScript here that we'll see in a minute. So now we want to validate that we're logged in with the right account. We want to validate the right account. So we're going to put test in like this. And then we're going to do a log out. And we're going to go ahead and run this. So again, if you're not using Testum for Salesforce, you could do this, but it would take a ton of clicks. And so we recognized that there was a huge need to quickly create all these different types of objects in Salesforce, whether it's an account or a lead or a contact. And we try to make that really seamless and really easy. And so we have a lot of different customers that use the tool, whether you're developing Salesforce apps, whether you're a Salesforce administrator and you're testing different things, like in our Salesforce, when an opportunity moves to close one, there's immediately a renewal opportunity that's opened. And to be able to quickly test that trigger, you can do that with the tool very easily. Wanted to briefly show you a more complex scenario around working with Apex. So we also have the ability to run Apex code. So we can see here, this is a step that's going to go in. It's going to create an opportunity. And then the test them for Salesforce is going to go in and validate that that opportunity existed. Another complex scenario, and this is where it gets into more of the customization of things, is you can use really complex test data sets within test them. So we can upload a file. It could be a CSV. It could be an Excel file. We're going to convert it to a JSON format. Here we have an array of different accounts, and here we have an object of company. And we're going to create an object. So if we just kind of show you what this looks like, this is a CLI action. This runs in Node.js outside of the browser. So if you wanted to go before the test ran and connect to a database and extract test data, or make an API call in the middle of the test and take that data and use it in a subsequent test step, you can do that with Testum. This is using the Faker API. It's basically generating a dynamic company object that we're going to use throughout the context of the test. And just to kind of show you this, we'll run this. It's going to loop through a bunch of accounts, but we can see that we have our own Testum iterator. This is the company object phone number. It's going to validate all of these things. And then the validation is going to validate all of the things that we've created dynamically in here. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay. Okay. Let me make sure I've got this going. Second here. And so I'm just running this test locally, so I need to run the agent. If you're going to run this in our cloud environment, you wouldn't necessarily need to do this, but we'll let this thing start to run, and then we'll kick this test off. Any questions that have come in, Scott?
Yeah, no, there's been several questions that have come in so far. And, again, everybody, keep them coming. We'll have some time afterwards to really be able to answer them as well. I guess one of the questions that came up, and I think this is specifically for you, Ian, as well, is that does the product work with Classic or Lightning?
Good question. So the Testum for Salesforce product works with Lightning exclusively. If you were looking at using Classic, you can still use Testum, but it would be the Testum product and it wouldn't be the Testum for Salesforce product.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for that. Keep the questions coming. So we're going to go ahead and run this test. And again, this is going to loop through. This is a more complex test because we're creating dynamic data, and it's going to go in. It's going to create multiple accounts. As we see in here, it's going to create the account, validate it, it's going to delete it. So it's doing all the cleanup for us. And we can see we can validate a ton of fields super quickly with Testum. So I just wanted to show you that. We'll stop this because it's going to run through like 15 or 20 other accounts, and we don't want you guys to have to sit here and see all that. Just wanted to show you a more complex scenario with Testum for Salesforce. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop that. The one other thing I wanted to talk about was maintenance. So I think, Scott, you mentioned this earlier, which is Salesforce. We know they make 1 or 2 updates a year where they change a lot of the things under the covers. A lot of the locators change. And if you're using a tool like Selenium, it can be really challenging to sort of go back or playwright and fix the locators and update them. We hear that all the time for people that are coming to us with open source. So I'm going to go ahead and run this test. And some of the locators on the login button here are going to change. And as you can see that here, we're going to go ahead, and this is going to perform a login step, and we're going to validate that we're still able to log in. So we can see here that it actually clicked that button, even though several attributes of that button have changed. And so what's going on here? What are we doing? Well, because we have the extension, we have access to the entire DOM and all the metadata for Salesforce, we can scan everything on the page. We can generate this confidence score, which gives us a probability of how likely we are to find that object. And even though 3 or 4 attributes of that particular button had changed, we're still able to find that particular object. So that's, again, one of the magic of the tool, that you can create these stable tests quickly in Salesforce, whether you're a developer or a manual tester or a Salesforce administrator and kind of move on and do other things that you need to be doing anyway. So just one or two other things to touch on. We covered authoring. We touched on maintenance. We have all these mechanisms to kind of organize your tests. So you can come in here and we can filter on, you can add labels to tests. So you can have labels for things like smoke or regression or a new feature branch that you're testing. You can do that. Speaking of branching, at the top, if you noticed we were testing in my environment here, we also support branching and merging. So for everybody that's creating a different instance of their Salesforce sandbox, we can create tests against different branches. And you can see that we're working within the context of my branch, but we also support branching and merging. We support pull requests, so you can control what branches you're making changes as your application is changing as well. So let me pause there. That's kind of a quick overview. See if there are any other questions that came in, Scott.
Yeah, no, there's been several questions. We'll get to them, of course, in a bit as well. But one question, I guess, for you, Ian, as well, is specifically, we talked about, no code flows here, but there's some questions about, do you offer the ability to have coded steps as well?
Yeah, exactly. And if you guys saw my screen when I was showing earlier, that there's a couple of ways we can do that. We support the ability to run Apex code which is obviously the native development language for Salesforce. You can do that in the tool. We also support the ability to run coded steps that either can run in browser, which is called a custom action, or CLI action, which is the more complex example, which runs in Node.js outside of the browser. And those are JavaScript. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, again, we'll have some more time to ask some more questions in a second here as well, but I just wanted to talk, bring this all together here before we get to that. We've talked a lot about, the importance of CI in terms of having these processes that you can, deterministically follow with each and every single release. And we talked about the need for having quality best practices for Salesforce, but really, it's AutoRABIT along with Tricentis that actually brings together these two different components here. AutoRABIT, as we've already talked about here, it has the solutions that provide Salesforce DevSecOps at scale. It has the seamless automation, the comprehensive data security solutions that Prasanth has talked about as well. And Tricentis really is here to provide the quality engineering, the testing solutions that use AI to really make things more, faster and to accelerate your testing processes here. You can, test smarter. You can release faster as part of your Salesforce solutions. And the solutions were built with these steps that are with Salesforce in mind, as Ian showed you earlier. You saw those steps there that are part of common Salesforce test flows. And really the combination of these two is what makes it so whenever you do an update to your application, you have both of these components coming together to really automate and ensure that everything that's needed as part of your release, it happens. And now I'd like to open the floor again for some additional questions here. We've had several of them come in. Enter them in your chat. Any questions that you've had come up, and we'll be happy to answer them as part of this webinar as well. One question that came in, and I'm going to hand it over to Prasanth in particular, is what Salesforce specific metadata does CodeScan support? How is it different specifically from Apex PMD?
Oh, that's a very good question. So Apex PMD is a hobby project that was ported from PND. Just to begin, let me just start by saying that we have a dedicated team of engineering who are all constantly looking at Salesforce metadata. So in terms of support for Salesforce, specific support for Salesforce metadata, I can keep listing them, but primarily, let me, because the Salesforce ecosystem is moving from workflows to flows, process builders, and profiles to permission set. Let me just say that we have support for all of those things here because we primarily see an uptick in the activity around those metadata. Apart from that, we support objects, we support Apex, we support LWC, we support the JavaScript that you bring into Salesforce. Pretty much the most necessary key aspects of Salesforce. And in the future, we will have also support for the Salesforce latest and greatest products that are coming out, like Data Cloud and prompt engineering.
Thanks. I have another question here that I actually think, both of you will have some good insights on in particular, because it's pretty general, and I think it kind of gets to the heart of what we're covering here is like, what are some common code quality issues that you see? I mean, I'll start with you, Prasanth, and get from your side, but then Ian, maybe you can give some insights in terms of some of the challenge you tend to see when people are testing out their Salesforce.
The most common one, I think it ranges from like hard to complex, but I'll tell you the most annoying one. The most annoying one that we get is, why don't people add description in help text when they're creating new fields? That is like the most annoying. Is it a major code quality issue? It's not, but it keeps the sanctity of the Salesforce org for any, like, to be metadata context aware, right? If you're using AI in the future on Salesforce, it is very important to have those. And in terms of other things, writing SQL queries in loops, writing SQL queries without security assertion. We have seen where profiles have unlimited admins. We spoke about that. So these are some of the common things that we see, and annoying things, like common and annoying.
Thanks, Prasanth. And Ian, any comments on your side in terms of some of the challenges that people tend to run into that specifically that testing helps identify and find?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was working with a customer that was trying to automate Salesforce with Playwright, and just all the complexity of even something as basic as the login, where it generates the SMS code that gets sent to the mailbox, or dealing with the maintenance pop-ups and all these different complexities with the login that were handled with our auto login step.
Excellent. Thanks. Again, keep adding your questions here. We'll keep answering as long as they keep coming in here. Another question for you, Ian, maybe you'll be able to give us some insights on, is about sort of the product licensing. How is it done? Is it user-based licensing? Maybe you can provide some insights here.
Yeah, great question. So, unlike our competitors, we offer unlimited users. So, you could have one user logging into the product, you could have 20 users logging into the product. It really doesn't matter to us. The way the product is licensed, and we're in the process of changing this a bit, but it's really based on the number of tests or concurrencies that you're running. So, if you had one test that you want to run across one browser, that's really how the product is sort of licensed. And that's kind of where we're going, and where we've gone with the other parts of the business in terms of test and mobile and test and web.
Excellent. And a different question for you, Prasanth, in particular, how do you solve merge
Oh,
conflicts in ARM?
that's a great question. So more conflicts in Salesforce are usually conflicts across the XML files. Now, since Salesforce does not, provide us their compiler on how these XMLs compile, we had to build our own compiler. So what that means is, when you have a merge conflict, we are not only able to predict sort of where does a merge conflict sort of fit in, but after your conflict resolution is done, we check for the integrity of the XML file, if it is following the marshaling and unmarshaling structure of Salesforce. So that how that translates into value for you is, let's say that you merged a super big profile and you're trying to deploy, and you keep getting profile deployment errors. Now, thanks to Salesforce, it does not give all the deployment errors in one go. It goes line by line. So let's say if you have a issue at line 5, it'll stop there. You have to re-prepare your package and redeploy. Let's say that you have issue at line 10, you have to stop it again. So what we do is, we take that pain out. We check for the integrity of that profile file. Um, we check if it fits into the Salesforce standards, so thereby saving you a lot of time, and getting over deployment issues, predicting, since these are large hundreds and thousands of lines, we tell you exactly where a particular block can go. And in terms of process, we also teach you how you can avoid merge conflicts to begin with, and how you can start sort of baselining your code. We have the tools and the bells and whistles for that. But the most important takeaway is, the heart of all of this is, we brought our own sort of, let's not call it a compiler, but we got our metadata aware engine, if you will, just like for Tricentis has theirs, that solves that problem. So it's a huge problem in Salesforce.
Excellent. And again, I have one more question here for you as well, actually, and specifically related to essentially, how does the connectivity between CI jobs and ARM in particular, how does ARM an instance handle the CI jobs in particular?
Oh, very good question. So one of the problem with CI is scale, right? So whenever you want to do a deployment, the availability of the system is the biggest challenge, because CI takes resources. So the way we built our CI engine is on a agent server architecture. So we have a centralized server that has child agents that are sort of connected to the server. So irrespective of how many jobs that you want to trigger off, let's say that you have a very large team, 100 developers working on a big Salesforce project, you would probably need about 20, 25 jobs every 1 hour or every half an hour. So you can address that kind of scale using our application.
Excellent. All right. Well, again, if anybody has any questions, keep asking them. But if otherwise, I think I have one question that I'd like to ask. Both of my co-presenters here in particular. We talked a lot about bringing together AutoRABIT and Tricentis here, and in terms of the combined solution here. But and we also showed you those diagrams that showed the general flow processes and sort of the complexity involved with getting a release out the door. I guess the question I'll ask to both people here, both of my co-presenters here, is like Prasanth, for example. Like what is the biggest place where you see people tend to get it wrong? And in particular, how does the combined solution of AutoRABIT and Tricentis really help address that need?
That's a fantastic question. Like I was saying, like what you cannot see is what you cannot fix. So to prepare a visual picture of how your shop is and where exactly your problems are, that is one of the first items to do. And I hope that you can take away that tool with you today. The second piece of the puzzle that we see a lot of challenges are in the lack of having those guardrails when the code is being developed and not after. That like Tricentis comes in like after you develop something, you put guardrails around it and make sure that you're shifting left. Code quality and code security from a static code perspective is also like super important. So having the right tool set, if you will, to surround your Salesforce, because do- sales do these tools come out of the box from Salesforce? They do not, and this is where we add value. This is how good looks like. Like this is mapping your process, having the right tools, having the right guardrails, taking care of those nasty issues that can end up in production. And we want to make sure that you don't end up in the news uh, uh, for the wrong reasons. So that's how I would answer it.
All right, Ian, do you have any thoughts on this?
Repeat the question,
In
Scott.
particular, sort of, the biggest sort of tripping points that people have, and how really these combined solution that comes together that helps us out.
I think the ability to connect to the Salesforce instance and kick off tests that run on Testum is huge, right? Because a lot of tools don't have built-in integrations easily that do that. I think the other thing is having a solution that allows you to easily create stable tests in Salesforce, which is going to allow you to focus on additional areas of testing, which you're probably not doing anyway.
Excellent. And I think the one thought that I'd like to leave us all with today is the fact that, testing Salesforce is actually, a real need. It's not something that you can actually sort of just, test out and make sure it works. It really has to have a plan, and you have to make sure that you're hitting all the important cases, considering how important it is to your business as well. Well, I think those are all the questions that we have. So I'd like to thank, both of my co-presenters, Prasanth and Ian, for joining us today. I think it's been a great discussion. I'd like to thank also everybody in the audience there for joining us as well. You can feel free to reach out to any of us to learn more information about AutoRABIT or Tricentis and how it can help meet your CI/CD and sales and testing needs for Salesforce. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Prasanth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Scott.
Bye.